Welcome to the Australian Hiker Podcast, Australia's longest running hiking podcast, downloaded over 1.3 million times worldwide and providing you with an Australian perspective on all things hiking. We're your hosts, Tim and Jill Savage, coming to you from Ngunnawal and Ngambri country.
In today's episode 352 of the Australian Hiker Podcast, we catch up with Neil Hendry, President of the Friends of the Heysen Trail Association, all about Australia's longest dedicated hiking trail. In my case, this is a trail I've been trying to do for the last 5 years, and for one reason or another, I've just never been able to get there. I love two key things about hiking, coastal hiking and arid hiking, and this trail has both. So I look forward to bringing you these series of podcasts, and hopefully this might encourage you to do at least a section of it, if not the whole trail. We hope you enjoy. If you'd like to help support Australian Hiker and this podcast, there are a couple of ways that you can help us out. Firstly, by sharing this podcast with your hiking friends and encouraging them to listen to it. Another way to support us is go to the Australian Hiker website at www.australianhiker.com.au and click on the supporters page and buy us a coffee. You can do a one-off donation or become a monthly supporter. All donations are greatly appreciated and help us to continue producing this podcast and blog. Now let's get on to today's episode. In a few weeks' time, I'll be commencing my southbound journey on the South Australia's Heysen Trail. This trail is Australia's longest dedicated hiking trail, spanning approximately 1,200 kilometres from Parachilna in the north, located in the Flinders Ranges, to Cape Jarvis on the coastline in the south. In this podcast episode, we catch up with Neil Hendry, the president of the Friends of the Heysen Trail Association, to get an introduction to the trail and a role that the Friends play in maintaining and upkeeping this wonderful resource. So Neil, thanks for making the time to talk with us about the Heysen Trail.
Thank you for the opportunity, Tim. We're looking forward to it.
Now, before we talk about the Heysen Trail itself, can you provide us with a brief overview of your hiking background, just to give us an idea of what you like to do hiking-wise?
Okay, so in context, I'm just about to push my 70th birthday. So I've been walking on and off probably since my mid-20s. I had a friend of mine who was trying to get some outdoor ed qualifications. So he needed people to go with him. And that was pretty hardcore stuff. That was, tents and transiers and having your own backpacks in and stuff like that. And there's some places I'd never been to before, like the Grampians and the Gammon Ranges. And that really got me hooked, I think, on walking. So I guess I've always been interested in hiking on and off, but nothing really structured until probably about 10 years ago. My wife and I started looking into the Heysen Trail. We did walking up in the hills behind here, get bumping into the trail markers. What's this Heysen Trail thing? So we started looking into it and decided we wanted to give it a go, like a sort of bucket list type thing before we retired. And we weren't certainly at the time very proficient in hiking and organising things. So the friends, because they do structured, organised group hiking, and that suited us perfectly. So we joined one of their end-to-end groups in 2016 to do the trail, which was kind of like a 6-year adventure for us, and completed it in 2022. These days we still go walking. There are some great walks locally where I live, sort of 5 to 15 kilometres up in the hills. We do a fair bit of travelling these days, and we try and look out for interesting places. Last year we were at Grand Canyon, and this year we did Kosciuszko, so places like that. Yeah, we still really, really enjoy getting outside into the bush and walking around. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good. Now, as far as the Heysen Trail is concerned, it's well known by keen hikers, but newer hikers may not be aware of it. Can you provide us with a bit of a short introduction to the trail, including where it got its name from?
Sure, no problem. There's walking trails that are being developed in the hills probably seriously since about the 1950s and 60s. But in 1969, there's a guy here called Warren Bonython. He's well known in South Australia. And he was talking to the National Trust at the time. He was a bit of a conservationist, explorer, author, particularly liked the semi-arid and arid country. And he proposed a long-distance walking trail to follow the spine of the Mount Lofty Ranges from Cape Jarvis up to the northern Flinders Ranges. And he managed to convince the government at the time to establish a long-distance trail committee, and the government put money into it and provided staff. This is 1970, and they were going to survey and map out where the trail would travel. In 1972, that committee was hunting around for a name for the trail. You've got to call it something. And they picked Sir Hans Heysen. Now, I get one, not most, but a lot of Australians would recognise he's one of Australia's greatest landscape painters. And he lives at a place called the Cedars, which is near Harndorf. That's a town up in the hills behind Adelaide. Why him? Well, he wasn't an actual hiker, but he hiked all over the place to pursue his art. And he had travelled and painted the whole length of the Mount Lofty and Flinders Ranges back in the 1920s and 30s in particular. He loved the Australian bush. He's quoted as capturing the essence of the country through which the trail runs. So the trail was named in his honour. And then from there on, for the next few years, not much happened, which I think is quite common in big trails. Funding started to dry up. They only opened one little section of the trail, 9 kilometres, up in Cleveland National Park, up at Mount Lofty. And that was about as far as it got until about 1978. And the Long Distance Trail Committee had its last meeting. Sir Warren Bonython basically retired from the whole episode. He'd given it started, or he got it started. And the responsibility for the trail transferred to a different department, Department of Tourism at the time. And it was almost dead in the water. Really, there was nobody working on it. There wasn't any funding available. But there was a guy in the department, a guy called Terry Lavender, and he was super enthusiastic, and he managed to convince the minister at the time that it didn't have to be dead in the water, that he was dedicated, he could make things happen. Just give him a bit of time, a bit of money, and he'll make things happen. And they basically said, yeah, go for it. And in a very short space of time, he had contacted landholders, negotiated a whole bunch of travel and walk through with stakeholders, and he managed to get a 50-kilometre section of the trail marked from Mount Lofty south through to Mount Magnificent. And that was sort of, put his money where his mouth is to prove the concept. And so the government said, yep, go for it. And Terry and a bunch of dedicated people were employed over the next few years. 1979, the trail went north to the Barossa Valley. 1981, it went all the way down to the south coast at Victor Harbour, and eventually got completed in 1993 pretty much in its current form. There's a few detours here and there, but that's the trail, I guess, the history of it anyway, in a nutshell.
Okay. Now, one of the things that's always interested me, the trail is always advertised as 1,200 kilometres, but I've seen varying figures around the place that have got different numbers on them. What is the actual length of the trail?
Right. That's kind of like asking how long is a piece of string. One of the context, look, the changes are always being made to where the trail runs. So, again, for context, the majority of the trail, well over 2/3 of the trail, passes through privately owned land. So that makes it different from a lot of other walking trails, which runs mostly through forestry or parks. So we rely on the goodwill of the landholders to allow us access. Detours are happening all the time. Last summer we had the big bushfire down at Deep Creek. So there's detours around there. The year before that was an equally large bushfire in the trails mid-north. We've got, what else have we got? We've got forestry logging, culling operations, floods. There's a major detour in the mid-north to go around a new wind farm that's being developed. There are culling operations that happen. There's a whole bunch of things. So we can't actually say definitively it is 1,200, but I think you'd be pretty fair to say if it was somewhere between 1,100 and 1,200, give or take a bit, you'd be pretty well right on. Yeah. So, and the friends, we work hard to try and make sure our website has the latest information, but it's a fluid thing. It's not like Europe where you have, people, walkers have right of way. We don't. Even through the national parks, forestry, for example, if they decide they want to log one section of the forest, well, that's it. We're out. We have to work our way around that section and move on from there. So it's always like that every year.
And what about the landscape? From me, I'm aware that the north starts in the Flinders Ranges, so it's that arid Australian bushland or scrubland, and then it finishes down the south in coastal environment.
Yeah.
What's the overall sort of landscape like? And I know it's going to vary over such a big distance.
Well, this is kind of where I wax lyrical, because having walked on the trail for 6 years, I was blown away by just so much of what I was actually seeing. One of the fantastic things about the trail is that it takes you into places where you just can't get there unless you're walking, right? You're not going to hop out of turn a corner and find a tour bus or, 4x4 cars roaring past. And it pretty much follows the original concept, which is following the spine of the ranges. So it's not, there are flat sections, but a lot of it is hilly. And when you get away from the city, the trails can be pretty rough, especially in the northern section up through the Flinders Ranges. Townships are few and far between. So the trail tries to follow places where you're going to get the scenery. We get a lot of feedback telling us it's an absolutely fantastic experience. And as you pointed out yourself, there isn't any other trail that I know of where you can do whale watching at one end and then go up through the vineyards in the middle and then come out, you're going to start at the top end. But it's not my word, I picked it up a long time ago, somebody described the Flinders Ranges as the place on the planet where the bones of the earth poke through. And to me, it's one of my favourite spots to go. We try and spend 2 or 3 times up there a year. Big skies, big landscapes, small country towns all the way up and down. It doesn't go through any of the major towns. Friendly locals. It's got a lot. And you can do it in just a little tiny bit. You can take mum, dad, grandparents, 3 or 4 kids and just do a little, 3 or 4 kilometre part. Or you can go off on your own sort of grand solo adventure if you want to. And in the northern section, which is pretty remote, a lot of the time you've got your place to yourself for days on end. And that one of the things about the trail is it caters for all these different types of walkers. So you can be a casual, you can be a day walker, you can do, the southern section is a 5-day walking trail, or you can do the whole lot and then take your time. We've got people who run the trail. Good luck to them. It's not something I'd ever planned to do. There are a group of runners who keep trying to do it quicker and quicker. They have their own backup teams, which you need to have. Or you can do it with organised groups. It just, I don't know, it caters for almost everybody. And the scenery from one end to the other, if you're prepared to take the time to do the whole thing, is just, it's just so varied and different and beautiful and awe-inspiring. And, you end up perched on top of a mountain somewhere and there's nothing between you and the horizon. Brilliant. Fantastic. Or you can come down south and be walking through ferns in little gullies with, foresty trees over the top. Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got it. Just getting back to one of the comments you made, I've got a friend that's into ultra marathons, and she's done it a couple of times. I think there's a 200-kilometre run that's done on the trail from time to time. So I think walking's one thing, but trying to run it, no matter how slowly you run it, it's like, that's a hard ask, I think.
I think it's a very hard ask, and the places where they don't stick to the roads. They're up you're running along the ridge lines and things like that. So good luck to them.
Yeah.
Not my thing.
Yeah, you mentioned there's a lot of private land involved, but
Yeah,
what's the animal life on the trail? I mean, I'm guessing you'll see farm animals from time to time, but what's the native animal life like?
there's a lot of domestic stuff closer to the city because obviously you're travelling literally through farmland. The rules are, from our point of view, what we tell people is if you're walking along and you see domestic stock, leave it alone. Just walk past. Basically, you're telling people just to leave the wildlife alone. In the north, if you're prepared to walk by yourself and you're quiet about it, you will see some of the local wildlife. Bird life is crazy. It's all around the place. I've been up there and seen rock wallabies up in Parachilna, but most of the time, a lot of the wildlife is nocturnal, so you won't see an awful lot. What else? Snakes, yes, come across 2 or 3 snakes, fortunately at a distance. But most of the larger stuff that people would like to see, like wallabies and euros and emus, they're around. It's just a matter of being a bit quiet and keeping an eye out as you go around to recognise them. Easy to walk past them.
Getting on to the Friends of the Heysen Trail, what does your role cover and what does the Friends group do?
The Friends of the Heysen Trail is a big group. It got established in 1986 by Terry Lavender when he called together a whole group of walkers to help him complete the trail. I mean, it's a big trail. There was only him and a few other people, and the Friends got together basically with the purpose of supporting the trail, to help build it, help maintain it, and so on. So it's a big trail. It's a big group. We have over 1,700 paying members in the Friends, and about 160 of those are active volunteers along the trail or helping out with our walking program and a few other bits. We've even got a few members who are still with us right from the very beginning. So they're great, and we celebrated them recently. Big group, lots of stuff to do, has to be organised to get things done effectively. So when I finished my walk at the end of 22, I was approached to consider taking on the role. And having just finished the trail, I had such an amazing experience. I was looking for a way to give back to the Friends. So I put my hand up. Currently, I'm in my 3rd year leading the council. The council has about 10 people on it. Basically, we manage the Friends group with the support of a whole bunch of committees. We have, for example, the Trail Maintenance Committee, a Walking Committee, Promotions Committee, Office, and so on like that. So a large part of my role focuses on governance work. We have to work pretty closely with the government department. That is the trail manager. So that's the Department for Environment and Water. There's a partnership between them, ourselves, forestry and water, that basically manage the trail. I'm also involved in some of the projects that we do. So currently I've been working with the new website. I do policy type stuff, forward planning. That's perhaps not the most exciting stuff, but it fits my skill set quite well. And then the various committees, people gravitate towards how they think they can best help Friends in the trail. And they largely run themselves. There's oversight, part of my role, along with the rest of the council. But largely, the walking group, for example, is autonomous from the trail maintenance group, autonomous from membership and so on like that. So it's a pretty big, pretty broad organisation. It works quite well.
Okay, and I believe the Friends has a shop as well, a small shop that provides some planning materials?
We do. There's a shop in the city, in the Epworth building on Perry Street. It's not very large. Again, it's staffed by volunteers, but it's a place that people drop into that can get hold of paper copies of maps, ask questions about the trail, what's happening on the trail, just have a chat with members, and there's some sort of resources there that people can get hold of, so you can buy things like T-shirts and so on, or you can order them. It's a very small shop, but it basically takes care of all of our administrative stuff in there as well.
Okay. Are volunteers responsible for a particular section and they maintain their own section on their own time frame, or is it more formalised?
Well, it's a mixture of both, because we basically do whatever works. So, as I said earlier, one of our specific objectives is supporting the government to build, maintain, promote the trail. So that's the main thing that we do. So we have the trail split up into 20 maintenance sections. They're different lengths because it depends on the logistics and where they're located. And each of those sections has a section leader. That section leader, in their own time, and more or less on their own schedule, but they recognise that it's fairly regular, walk the sections of the trail, and they stay in touch. They get to know the landholders, and so they monitor the bit of the trail that they're interested in, and then they work with usually a very small team to carry out any of the important maintenance, stuff that they can do basically by hand, because a lot of the places you can't get vehicle access. So things like identifying hazards, replacing trail markers, clearing away undergrowth. They might do some minor trail alignments. They also then report issues to the trail maintenance group, and we create an annual asset maintenance plan that then gets forwarded to the department for approval, and then the department gives us a $75,000 per annum grant to basically cover all the materials, fuel costs, etc., for the section leaders. Also the field teams that go out and do the work on the ground. And we also have, well, we don't own it, but we also run what we call the shed, where we have a different group of volunteers, and they put together the trail infrastructure stuff that we are then going to carry out and take out by trailer to wherever it is, and we'll install it there. The trail runs through quite a few national parks, but that's different because there are rangers and others there who will do most of the work there. But everywhere else, and that's most of the trail, we're talking about 75 to 80% of the trail, is outside of parks. It's either on privately owned property or maybe it might be council land. The Friends basically do all of that. So the actual trail itself in those areas, along with, I don't know how many tens of thousands of markers, the signage along the trail, signs in some of the key local towns, the shelters that we build for remote hiking. There are huts along the trail that are privately owned that we renovate them, water tanks that we install. There are 300 plus stiles because going through private property, you're always going up and over fences. That's all maintained by the Friends. We have a couple of other local walking groups, such as Retire Active SA Bushwalkers. And there's also a long-standing group called the Wunder Group Bushwalkers. And they have their own sections that they do, but we all coordinate that together. And last set of figures that I had said that we log over 4,000 hours each year just on trail maintenance. So it's an important role. It's one we take as a critical role for us. Section leaders, because they're the ones who actually are on the land. They're the face of the trail, if you like, or the face of the Heysen Trail to the landowners.
Yep.
The majority of them. They're the ones that know what's going on, and we are usually the first point of contact for all the private landholders. It's an important role, and they're often involved in the trail reroutes. So as I think I said earlier, there's a major one at the moment in the mid-north. There's a new wind farm in construction up there. And while we can go near some of the wind farms, we're not allowed in while they're actually doing the construction.
Yeah.
So there was a major rewrite that we've had to do. We've actually took out one whole section of the trail. So the skill set that our section leaders have is pretty varied. You know, you're obviously going to have to be fit and active because you're out on the trail a lot. A lot of the places you can't get vehicles into. So materials have to be carried in from the nearest track, and that can be fairly arduous. Even something as simple as, I'm going to replace trail markers. You've got to carry them in on backpack with the tools to do it, and you might be trekking in 5 or 6 or 7 kilometres from the nearest vehicle access. They're a really dedicated bunch of people, luckily for us, and they really enjoy the work. That's true. So if any of the people out there are thinking that they can drive and they're fit and they don't mind doing a bit of welding, we can probably fit you in somewhere.
I was going to say, so I mean, apart from being able to walk and have a bit of fitness, are there any specific skills? You mentioned welding, but are there any skills, or will you take anybody to be able to do some of the work as they go?
We'll take almost anybody. If you become an actual trail maintenance person, the government will put you through the relevant safety courses that you need to do, and then it's just a matter of letting the trail maintenance group know. On our website, there are plenty of links in there. You can get in contact with people, see what sort of things we're looking for. I know the shed, for example, is, because we're building stuff there, there's a different set of skill set there than if you were on one of the teams out putting in stiles or something, which is largely just manual labour.
As you say, it's you look at some of the trails in Tasmania where they just drop pallets in with helicopter, and then you've just got to get yourself in there. But when you've got to carry everything in, even short distances, it certainly makes things a lot harder.
It does. And we've got photographs going back sort of 15, 20 years ago, actually showing volunteers with backpacks full of trail markers, for example, hiking up and down hills to get to places where they can put them in, or carrying trolleys or stuff like that. So it can be quite physically demanding at the time. But the nice thing about it is it's little teams that go up. It might be 5 or 6 people that go up. So it's almost like a getaway picnic sometimes because they really enjoy the work and the camaraderie. So it's not hard work in that respect.
In relation to the trail, you said one of the things that the Friends of the Heysen Trail do is they run walks over a period of years. So you walk the entire trail over a 6-year period. Tell us a bit more about those walks.
All right. So we run a full walks program. So I need to put something else in context on that point about walking. Because the walk is largely on private land, the trail is closed during the fire danger season.
Yep.
So that makes it a different experience from some other walks. The only section which is open the whole year round is that southerly section from Cape Jarvis through to Victor Harbour. The other sections, and the fire season can change from one year to the next. That makes it a bit unpredictable this year. We've had people coming from overseas who, booked plane tickets and stuff like that, and they suddenly discover we've had a really bad year, and they've extended the fire season for 4 weeks, and it can mess things around. But that's out of our control. The government, as the managers of the trail, have the liability for the landholders. So rightly so, they don't want people trekking through in dangerous times of the year. So if you allow for that, the rest of the year we run a pretty comprehensive walking program. We do a whole load of day walks for people who just want to, connect and go for maybe a short walk of, 5 to 10 kilometres. We do a lot of practice walks for the people who are enrolling in the multi-day hikes. And then we have the end-to-end walks that we run every year. Plus there is also some other walks that we take on board, like the Lavender Trail. There's an associate, it's about 300 kilometres, Walk the York. And we run multi-day walking trips with those. They're large groups. There's sort of an attrition rate. We start from the southern end. And that southern end is, I guess, a good introduction to people who've never done longer distance hiking, because along the bottom edge, it's up and down. You're scrambling up and down over bluffs and along beaches, and there's not that much road access to the actual trail. So it's a bit of a tester for people who sign up for a multi-day walk and then discover that it's a bit harder maybe than they thought it was, or it might be perfect for them. And then we hook them into end-to-end walks. The nice thing about them is that they're well organised. There are 4 or 5 leaders on every walk. There's a vehicle that has access to, or can get into the trail at different points for access in case there's any issues. What else can I say? It's a bit weird. If you're into being out in isolation, then these walks are probably not for you. Because we can have upwards of 50 people in the group, and that sounds weird. You think, how can you go walking with 50 people? But the trail itself means you're only ever talking to like person in front, person behind. So, and because it's over 4 or 5 or 6 years, you make heaps of really good friendships. And it's a social activity amongst everything else. A lot of fun along the way as well. And because it's so well organised, we always oversubscribe every year.
Yep.
But we just don't have the personnel to actually run more than one new walk every year. To understand, if it takes 6 years to get there, that means we're actually running 6 end-to-end walks at the same time.
Yep.
On different parts of the trail.
Okay, no, that sounds good. I think it's as you say. I mean, there are those of us that have the ability to spend multiple weeks in one go and do it in one hit, and want to do that as well. And there are those that want to do a bit each year and spread it over the time frame. And I think it's good that you've got the ability, or people have got the ability to do small sections or do the whole lot in one hit.
That's true. And we do have quite a few people who contact us to say, we want to do it in one hit. There are 61 walking sections of the trail.
Yep.
And they range, I think the shortest one's about 12 kilometres, the longest one is 31. So, you can do it in one big hit if that's the way you want to do it. And the nice thing about that is we've had feedback from some people who've done it, and they often start from the northern end, as you're about to do, because that's the harder section of the trail. They love the isolation. They love the, just being there and watching the stars above at night. And then as you get perhaps a little bit more tired, you're getting into more civilized, and you can sort of go sideways to get your coffee, that kind of thing, and end up at the trail further south. But it's a daunting task if you're going to do it that way, but it's exhilarating at the same time.
No, that's fair enough. I'm certainly looking forward to it. As I said, I mean, for me, my 2 favourite hiking environments, the coastal environment and the arid environment. So
gotcha.
There's very few trails where you can get both on the one trail. So looking forward to it. Yeah.
Oh, you're going to enjoy it. You really are.
One final question. I believe that 2026 is the 40th anniversary for the Friends Group. What does this mean for you as a group, and where is the group heading to from here?
What it meant for us was a time just to sit back and reflect, sort of, wow, Like I said, we actually have some members who've been with us from the beginning, so we certainly wanted to acknowledge them, but also we wanted to celebrate and remind people about, like Warren Bonython and Terry Lavender, who actually got the trail up and running. So it was a sort of a commemoration of them as well. Looking back, we can see how far the trail has come. We really do believe that the trail it's not a project, it's a legacy thing. We want to leave the trail in a better condition than we got it, and if possible, we want to leave it more secure than it was when we moved in. So we're working pretty hard with the government on the current processes to get the land management agreements in a much better shape than they have been in the past. And so into the future, it's not a tightly held secret, but the Heysen Trail is one of those places that is not hugely well known outside of Australia. And we reckon it's an asset to the whole state that needs to be, I don't know what's the word, it needs to be promoted to the world, that if you're a hiker, this is one place you need to come because it's going to blow you away. And that's what we would like to do. We would like to actually see the trail recognised nationally, internationally as an actual destination for people to come. And we're not doing it on our own, trying to build up local community ownership, involvement in the trail. Some of the little towns that we go through, we have great relationships with the people there who themselves promote the trail, which is fantastic. We know that there are some people who run businesses along the trail, fantastic. We know some of the local councils up and down the length of the trail who recognise it as an asset in their area, fantastic. And we want to build on all of that just to really get the trail promoted. We don't want to over-promote it to the point where, like, as you said, Kosciuszko, 100,000 people there. We'd much prefer that you can still get to the places where you can just sit and dangle your feet over the edge and there's no one between you and the horizon. That's part of the whole charm of the trail. At the same time, we're more than happy that you can come down to the southern section of the trail and detour off to the nearest winery, if that's what you like to do, or go through some of the little market towns along the way and stop for a while. So it's a tourism draw card as well. All good. We believe all of that will promote the trail, just make it a better trail.
Okay, that's good. So we've been talking with Neil Hendry, President of the Friends of the Heysen Trail, all about Australia's longest dedicated hiking trail and the role the Friends play. Thanks for taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you, Tim. Really enjoyed the talk.
So that was our interview with Neil Hendry, President of the Friends of the Heysen Trail Association, and I hope that it's actually provided a bit of an overview of the trail itself and the thing that the Friends organisation go through and do. The things that really stood out to me in that interview was Neil came to the Friends of the Heysen Trail first as a section hiker with his wife, where they did the entire trail over a 6-year period. And this is one of the services that they have on offer. And then not long after that, he was encouraged to become president. And I think that's often the case with these sort of community-based organisations. Someone that's got the time and the skills, coming off the trail, being really enthusiastic and loving the trail, they're primed to be able to sort of be encouraged to contribute and take part. And Neil said he was looking at a way he could actually help and give back to the organisation. The mention of Terry Lavender came up a couple of times in that interview, and Terry, by the sound of it, was a state-based public servant who was crucial in getting this trail up and going after it sort of stagnated a bit. And certainly we have a lot to owe Terry in getting this trail off the ground. But people may also be aware of the Lavender Trail in South Australia. And I must admit, the first time I ever heard of Lavender Trail, I just assumed it was a lavender growing area, not that it was named after a person. The trail is normally advertised as a 1,200 kilometre trail. And in talking to Neil, he said it really varies. He said they had one section that they've had to redo because they're building a new wind farm. Now, typically the wind farms are fine with people walking through them, but not during the construction phase. So they've had to sort of work their way around and redo a new section for that. And I must admit, I had a set of maps and trail guides from 2021, which was when I was originally planning on doing this walk. And I noticed when I got the new set, I thought I better, because it's sort of 5 years on, that there was a couple of new maps where they've had to change sections. The other thing with the distance as well is I'll be using far out guides. And I think the far out guides estimate that this trail is 1,073 kilometres, whereas Neil was saying between 1,100 and 1,200 kilometres. And I think that's going to depend on whether you do any offshoots or additional pieces as well. So Neil's actually encouraged me. He said there's one mountain, and I can't remember the name of it, that it's worthwhile going up just from the sheer view of the area. When I asked Neil about the environment and what the trail was like, and again, you're talking about a 1,200 kilometre trail that starts in arid South Australia and works its way down to the coastal part of South Australia, going through the winery region. And he said the comments he made that really stood out to me was big skies and the bones of the earth poking through the landscape. And that's the sort of stuff that I love about arid hiking. Having done the Larapinta Trail, that was my first real long distance trail, and it's stuck with me, and I've always loved that trail. So I definitely am looking forward to this trail, and it's not all arid, arid forests, coastal areas. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. He mentioned the runners, and I do have a friend that's into doing 200-kilometre running races, and that's typically done on sections of the Heysen Trail, and it's not the easy sections either. So I've seen photos of her when she's done these trips that they're running on trail areas that I'll be walking on when in the coming weeks. Neil was saying that a lot of this trail is on private land, and sometimes you don't have a choice. Bibbulmun Track, yes, some of it's on private land, but there's a fair chunk of it that go through forests. Sometimes if you just try and stick with state land or forests or national parks, you really do limit what you're doing, and it's hard to get that connection point. So being able to convince the landowners that this is a good thing and we're not going to impact on their stock or damage their infrastructure, that's all about developing these relationships with the landowners, and they seem to have done it really well. So a lot of private land, and I must admit I've done trails in the past where I've walked through paddocks and there's been a whole lot of young cows and young bulls in the paddock, and they do their little mock charges at you, all for just a bit of show and bluff. But if you're not used to farming conditions and not used to farm animals, it can be a bit disconcerting. So, I'm certainly expecting to see a lot of farm life, but also, as Neil said, there's a lot of bird life. And he said a lot of the actual wildlife is nocturnal, and my plan is to do some night hiking. I've just got to that's one of my jobs over the next week, is to work out which days I can do that on based on when there's a full moon and getting the full moon at the right times. The Friends group commenced in 1986, and they've currently got 1,700 members and 160 volunteers. So there's a lot of people involved in this trail, and I think there's a lot of people that really care about this trail, particularly with all the private land. In the national parks areas, they're saying they are often helping out with that, but it's under the guidance of the national park staff. But when you're putting things like more than 300 stiles across fences, they've got to be repaired and maintained at some point, and that's on private land. The Parks Service don't deal with that, so they do a lot of the maintenance. They do things like replacing trail markers and signage. They've built a lot of the shelters, so there's a lot to keep them busy over the year as it goes. In addition, with the Friends group, there's also a walking group. As Neil mentioned, he did his hike of the Heysen Trail over a 6-year period, and I'm guessing that averages out to roughly 200 kilometres a year. And, not everyone wants to spend 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks walking this trail, and not everyone has the ability of sort of fitness or comfort-wise to do it. So spreading it out over a period of years means that you are getting to see the trail in different years. And at the moment, they've had a lot of rain this year, and I'm looking at photos of people that are doing the trail at the moment, and it's just so green and lush. Not something you expect of arid Australia, but it's just that the way the weather conditions are going. So even though I'm still a couple of weeks off from starting my trip, I'm still expecting a lot more greenery than I would have in a normal year. And I think by doing this trail over a period of years, you get to see it in different weather conditions. While we're talking about doing the walk itself, this trail is not open for a through hike over the entire year, particularly during the private land when there's fire bans and high fire danger. The farmers don't particularly want you walking through the land. It only takes one careless accident or with a fire or a stove to start a bushfire. So typically this trail is closed from around about mid-November through to about mid-May, and it does vary depending on what the weather conditions are doing. But there is the last section, the coastal section, which typically tends to be open throughout the year. So if you are trying to do this walk, it's a seasonal thing. So really it is from June through probably until about the end of September, early October, that you've got to pick the time. They also run a shop, both a physical shop as well as an online shop, and they sell maps. I've got a wall hanging of the trail, patches, and just things like that, just to help people plan the hike. So as I said, I've bought the little brochures, and it talks about each section. It's got a map of each section and the details of what you're seeing and what you need to consider. So definitely worth thinking about if you are planning this walk. Overall, they're saying that they spend about 4,000 hours a year of volunteer time working on the trail, doing everything that they do. So if they had to pay somebody, or you had to pay government to do it, that's when we'd probably end up with a usage fee on this hike. But because of the volunteers and the work they do, we haven't got to that stage, and hopefully we never will. Wind farms, I was aware wind farms are on this trail, and it's interesting. I was talking to someone about this, and they're saying, it can be a bit noisy. And I'm thinking, yeah, having walked through the Great Southwest Walk in Victoria in May of this year, April, May, walking straight underneath the turbines, yep, it's noisy. But, if you're a distance away, 50, 100, 200 metres away, it's not so bad. So not something that's particularly going to be worrying. But, yeah, I don't mind the wind farms. I did learn the hard way that you don't look up at the blades as they're going around as you're walking through it. It's to make me feel queasy. One of the things that the volunteers have to deal with is, and while there are road access to some of these areas, it's not always the case. So they said replacing some things like trail markers or some signage, sometimes they just have to carry the material in. And there is going to be a limit there. If you're having to put steps or do something like that, it's going to be a bit hard. But it does mean that you may be able to get a helicopter in there, but it doesn't seem to be something that's common on this trail. Whereas you look at Tasmania, they seem to use a lot of helicopters to get a lot of the big heavy stuff in where they can. So certainly, as I said, that interview, I'd already had a good discussion previously when I was doing this walk, planning on doing this walk in 2021, and it ended up not doing it. But it was good to have this chat because it really enthused me again to see what's there. The Friends group is really helpful, and people I know that have done the trip have been really helpful, and including things like the Friends website is a really good resource. And there's also some Facebook pages where people that are going through and doing the walk at the moment are actually going through and posting images and photos. So it's good to see what's going on there at the moment. People seem to be doing this on a regular basis. So while I don't expect there to be hundreds of people on the trail, I do expect to come across people on a semi-regular basis, those travelling north in particular, and also those travelling south that are either a bit slower than I'll be or are a bit faster that are going to overtake me. So this was the first of our podcast episodes in our Heysen Trails series. I have allowed 8 weeks to do this trip, and if it takes me 8 weeks, there'll be 8 on-trail podcast episodes. There's this episode which you're now listening to. The episode that follows this one is the expectations episode that I do before all my longer hikes, and talking about what I expect to see, how I expect the experience to be, and what I'm actually thinking about. And then at the very end of the trip, there'll be an expectations versus reality episode, which is talking about, well, this is what I expected to happen. How did it actually pan out, and what did I actually think of this trip? So all up, I'm expecting between 10 and 11 podcasts, and hopefully creating a resource that people can use if they're planning on doing this trip in the future. That's all for this podcast episode. We hope you've enjoyed, and we hope you've learnt a lot about Australia's longest dedicated hiking trail. That's all for me. Bye for now.